Hello, my name is Lorraine Saintus, and I have the pleasure of sitting with Dr. Eastland and Sheena Sapaula. Now, today our topic is going to focus on how to protect and create and leave a legacy in a recession. Dr. Eastland, can you tell us about yourself?
I'm Dr. Eastland. I'm AKA known to everyone as Dr. Shirley. I'm from Waco, Texas. Been in the military, worked as a nurse, and thank God for just letting me be retired at 45 to see another year after year.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and Sheena Sapaula, can you just give us a little background on yourself as well?
Yes. Born and raised in Northern California. I wanted to go to school because I knew that was, in my world, the key to financial freedom. My parents couldn't afford it, so I ended up getting a softball scholarship, attended the University of Pittsburgh, had my finance degree and marketing degree. And after college is where most people learn all their biggest lessons. So went to the corporate world and started learning about money once you receive your first paycheck. And I was raising my son at the time. Ran into my now husband, Matt Sapaula, who's been in our industry for now over 25 years. And I've really had a good understanding through trial and error and just by watching, observing, and asking the questions of certain people about how money works.
All right, thank you. Well, Dr. Eastland, I know you had a few questions that you wanted to ask
Yes,
Sheena.
I would like to ask Sheena. Sheena, as we enter this recession, where do you recommend that we put our cash?
You know, I get that question a lot. I think for most people, it's not about I have to have my cake and I can't eat it either type of a concept, but you really can have your cake and eat it too. Because people do a lot of different investments in 4 particular industries. Either it's in real estate, which is commercial, industrial, residential. They'll put it in banks, they'll put it in the stock market, and then of course they'll put it in the life insurance industry. All of these are all necessary. The thing that people make the biggest mistake is not preparing for when bad things happen. Mm-hmm. So whether that be death related, health related, or of course a recession, because they've worked so hard to build up all these assets. The only dilemma is we've got to find ways to ensure that these assets stay protected even during the worst of times. So I'm a big fan of the insurance industry playing a big role in that. They tend to be the good backup plan, I guess you could say. If you look at the underlying tone, you'll see it in all the other industries. With real estate, before you own a home, you have to have homeowners insurance. Banks are FDIC insured. Any assets in the stock market, there has to be insurance on the individual that provided it. So for a lot of people that have all these assets in the more riskier way, they just have to implement a certain degree of the insurance industry just to make sure that when bad things happen, all these things they built up is protected.
Very good. So, what would be your advice for a 35-year-old who is married with 2 children?
You know, we call those the sandwich generation.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is because you have them also concerned about their parents, right? Because we're living in a world that people no longer are passing away in the 60s and 70s. The average lifespan is now taking people into the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond.
So true.
So you have these gentlemen and ladies that now have to be concerned about how am I going to make sure to take care of my parents that are aging, because long-term care plays a role. And also if retirement, the way that they planned, didn't work out the way that it's supposed to. You have people with a lot of fears that the parents are going to run out of money in retirement. Now, you couple that with what, a 35-year-old faces today, which is I'm trying to accumulate and make as much money as I can, but we are dealing with the rising tax environment. So with that being said, I have a family to take care of, I have kids to raise, and I think a lot of times parents also want to have their kids in private schools just to make sure that they're maintaining control about what they're being exposed to. So for a 35-year-old, the biggest thing is to, when you are building up assets or money, 2 things to keep in mind. One, make sure that you are implementing tax-free strategies, because that's going to help you big time. The other one is making sure that your parents have what they call living benefits. And the reason I say that is because the number one expense in retirement years is all revolved around health care. So there's policies today that say, hey, listen, if you ever have a heart attack, stroke, cancer, or any long-term care need, I'm going to let you use the death benefit as tax-free cash while you're alive. That ends up being a really great financial backup plan as that 35-year-old has to prepare for aging parents. And in regards to taking care of their current family, of course, making more income is always going to be the number one thing. But next inside of that is once that income is made, being able to protect it against the rising tax environment.
I hope you're listening because Sheena's giving us some very interesting points today. Now, we've discussed the 35-year-old. What would be your advice for and 55-year-old as they prepare for retirement? And some are retiring a little earlier than 55. I notice with kids and they're preparing them for college. What would be your advice to them?
You see a lot of, especially in that age group, debt is their number one concern because they've acquired a lot of it up to that point. And it's not necessarily because they just love being in debt. It's because the natural law of progression is that's exactly what was led to it. A big reason is because most of their retirement funds are locked up until they're 59 and a half. So we're talking about defined contribution plans like 401ks or IRAs. So it's really forcing people before the age of 60 to take out a lot of loans. And so I talk to people all the time, instead of taking these loans out, because what we notice is when you look at banks, for example, banks get their money from direct deposits, which is from us. But when we give that money to the banks, we get less than 1%. Yet what the banks do a really good job is they recycle our money and give it back to us in the form of debt. So whether it be car loans, personal loans, credit cards, or student loans or mortgages. But they're not charging 1% on those loans. They're charging above and beyond that. So I teach people that you need to become your own bank. And that's a concept that a lot of people, if they spend that time learning it, it prevents them from being so much entrenched in debt to other people and instead allows them to save more money up to that point. Now, the other dilemma for that age group is that a lot of their retirement that they're basing off of is tax deferred. And I talk about this a lot. In 1913, the 16th Amendment was passed that allowed Congress to tax us on our income. Now, at the time, it was only about 7%. Now, that was pretty low. But, of course, that was great revenue. So that definitely went up. And the highest that taxes have ever been is 2 years prior to the end of World War II, which was 94%. So just imagine you're making $100,000, $94,000 of it goes to taxes. It's not fun. So they brought that back down to 70% in the 70s and then again down to 37% in 2018 till present. Now, this is the dilemma. That age group of 55 is now going into retirement. They're probably not going to be officially retired for another 10 to 15 years minimum. But we have a very big debt issue right now with our country, nearing 30 trillion probably by the end of this year. And with that debt, you also have the value of the U.S. dollar being compromised outside of our country, which affects GDP. So when that happens, they have to raise the taxes. Now, the scary part about that is you have a lot of people with tax-deferred retirement vehicles, meaning nothing in those retirement vehicles have been taxed. So imagine that 55-year-old as they go into the retirement age in the next 10 or 15 years. They're now having to draw from these accounts. And at first, it was 37% of what they draw goes to taxes. But just imagine, be prepared that 37% will go up. So 39.6% is what the current administration just proposed right now. So we're seeing that it's about to happen. And so eventually it's going to get into the 40s and the 50s, depending on what state you live in. So if you're in California and New York, you're probably looking anywhere from 40s to 50% of taxes. So the biggest thing I tell people that are in their mid-50s as they prepare for retirement is to consider what they call converting it. So from tax deferred over to tax free, just to protect themselves from that type of tax environment. And the second thing would be getting life insurance with living benefits, of course, because they are going to be positioned to be living longer than ever before, and they have to prepare for the health related costs that are going to come their way.
Amen. Oh, this is so interesting. She's enlightening me as we go. We've covered the 35-year-old, the 55-year-old. Now, here's a section that really need help. How about the 70-year-olds with grandchildren trying to leave a legacy? So what would you recommend for the 70-year-old bunch?
My favorite group, I'll tell you that, okay? They outnumber us. By and far, they outnumber us. And they call it peak 65 next year, which means the largest number of individuals that were turning the age of 65 are upon us. Now, we've known this, the baby boomer generation.
Yes.
And they've really set the tone, but they are larger than Generation X and millennials combined. And what we have to face right now, especially what they're facing, is knowing that they're going to live live longer than ever before. They're probably going to live as long in retirement as they were working. Now, most retirement vehicles for that group were the three-legged stools. And that was, one, they had a pension, two, they had Social Security, and three, they had their personal savings. Now, pensions, of course, are few and far between. We have a pension crisis right now, and that's merely because it used to be a great retirement vehicle, because once you retire, you have a guaranteed income for life. You never had to worry about outliving your money because that paycheck was going to be there. But for the state, the counties, and the private companies, that became expensive only because people decided to live longer after retirement. They were expecting them to pass away right after they retire, but they kept on kicking, which is great. But that became a very expensive retirement tool, which is why it's very few and far between that people have pensions. And then you couple the other leg of that stool, which is Social Security. And if you just kind of do the math, the number of people in retirement is larger than those that are in the working force. You deal with a recession that has people being laid off. You have artificial intelligence replacing jobs. And we have a really big dilemma because we don't have enough people funding Social Security, not only for the largest group going into retirement, but for the fact that they're going to be living very long. So their biggest dilemma right now is not to outlive that money. And if they have these defined contribution plans, my number one thing is, hey, you don't have to have a pension. You can actually create your own pension by doing what they call a direct rollover into an index annuity with a lifetime income rider. And essentially what that does, allows you to take what you have in terms of retirement and make sure that you guarantee that you will have a paycheck every month for the rest of your life until the day that you pass away.
And when you've hit the baby boomer generation, that's me, and so I'm enlightened even more as you discuss this, and I hope you will too, because these are interesting facts that are real, live, and going on today in 2023. So I'm advising everybody to please hear this, get educated on it, take your grandma to get some help, your mom or whoever, but this is very important because times are changing. And we're going to have to, be ready for when the recession began and end. It's going to probably be a big crisis coming.
It's definitely coming.
It's definitely the time now to get prepared. Thank you very much, Sheena.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. What about a person entering into their career? What game plan would you recommend they have? Because most of them are entering today and they don't have a goal or plan in place for this. What would you recommend to them?
For this age group, it's just a different generation because you have a lot of entrepreneurs that are being birthed in this, which is, it's the American dream. You love that fact. Now, when they do start to accumulate wealth, the one thing they have to keep in mind is they're probably going to live longer than any other generation before them. And with taxes going in the direction that they're going, I would highly recommend that when they choose any vehicle, they definitely make the foundation vehicle anything tax-free. It could be a Roth IRA, it could be a Roth 401k, it could be a cash value life insurance policy, but by any means necessary, they need to protect what they do accumulate. Now, outside of that, if they do want to take the riskier investments, they can go ahead and do that. It's just when they gain profits, when they gain equity, especially if it's in real estate, just make sure there comes a point you might want to take some of that profit, some of that equity, and put it somewhere safe, and then leave the remaining exposed to risk. So this is where this generation can learn so much from the previous generations. And the couple of things they need to protect themselves against. One is making sure that they have life insurance in case anything happens to them, Lord forbid. Number two, to make sure they have living benefits in case they get ill, because that would prevent them from being able to work in order to generate income. Number three, protection against market losses. Number four, protection against taxes. So as long as they have those things covered, then the last thing makes it very easy, which is passing on the legacy. So they say the number one thing to pass on to the next generation is not income or money. It's actually how to deal with that money, meaning intellectual property. So their ability to understand how can I take what I build in this generation and pass it on from one generation to the next without having to compromise and have that lost in one generation.
Thank you very much. Everything you're saying is so interesting in their facts, and I want y'all to really get this. This is important. You're getting your education free on it. And so please tune in and help your families and everything, because a recession is coming and we need to be prepared. And we want to thank Sheena for giving us a free education today of all different ages. So please tune in and keep the facts going.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eastland and Sheena, for sharing this information. If you would like more information on the topics that we discussed, please click on the link below and we'll be in touch. Thank you.